Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to take a look at how to do this cooldown function for your ability tray Diablo style. Let's get in. Okay, so let's get started with setting up the material first. In our content drawer, inside of the ability manager, I've created just an empty folder called material because we're going to create a material and it doesn't really fit in any of the other folders. So inside of the material, I'm going to go ahead, right click and create a new material type, material. We're going to call this the cooldown material and open it up, double click to open it. And here we need to change two options here. First, we need to change this into a user interface. It's not going to be, we're not going to use this material on a surface. We're going to use it on an interface. And second, the blend mode, we need it to be translucent so we can see through it. So once you set both of them up, now this material, I'm not really good at making materials to be very honest, but I did do some research and I found out how to make the circular material to be filled. So if you follow along, you should be able to get this material done as well. For my Patreons, I'll make sure that I add this file to the Patreon folder so you can actually download it without having to remake this. I am going to walk you through it. I'm going to create a texture coordinate here. And also I'm going to create a constant, actually it's a constant 2. Constant to vector, and make both constant x and y at 0.5. Now we need to add a subtract node, subtract 0.5 x and y from the texture coordinate. Now we take this value and we're going to do a component mask. We're going to do a component mask on the R channel first. This will get us the value of x that is coming from. And then also we're going to get the value of the G channel, which is the Y. So we're going to take the subtract, put it on this, and then we're going to call what is called the arctangent 2. This will make this value, which is 0 and 1, into a minus 180 to 180 degree angle. So we take the R and then we connect it to the X, and then the G is the Y angle. Let me just move this around just to make this clean. Now that we have a minus 180 to 180 degree angle, we're going to divide this by a pi, 2 pi, which is going to be, we'll use a constant here, and 2 pi is going to be 6.283185. Single pi is 3.14, so 2 pi is 6.28, and there's additional numbers. So now when you divide it by pi, that 180, now you're going to get a central angle, and we're going to add a 0.5 to that angle. We're going to go again another constant here and add a 0.5. And now we're going to create a new scalar parameter. Now this is our cooldown parameter. What this parameter is, we're going to call this the cooldown. Oh. Now we want this radius or the circle that it's going to fill and unfill be based on this cooldown number. So we're going to take the entire value of this radius that we just created and then do a step. Step is basically a less than or greater than node. If the bottom value is greater than the top value, it's going to result 0, and if it's the other way around, it's going to result to 1. It's almost like a Boolean, but it's in the material coordinate, as material coordinate does not have a less than or equal to function. We're going to take this cooldown, and then we're going to set this in step 1. Now we're going to set this cooldown to 1 for now, 1 being fully filled, 0 being not filled at all, or minus 1, or minus 0.1 or such, because I think it's at 0, it's still going to show you a single line. You'll see in just a moment. And that is going to be our step. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the step and we're going to create a lerp node to do an interpolate into this material, right? So we're going to take this lerp node and then add it to the final color. And the step node, greater or lower, because 1 is fill, 0 is not fill, and we want to make that into alpha, to show or not to show, right? And then we want the opacity mask to be on the step as well. And you would ask, okay, so why this lerp node is here? Because we're going to choose the color of this using this lerp node. Now, if I were to go ahead and then change this cooldown to like 0.5, you'll see half of that triangle, half of the square is gone. If I make it like 0.75, you'll see this. And then if I make it 0.8, 0.9, 0.99, like you get the idea. It's actually working as a circle, but then in a square manner rather than being a circle, because our ability icons are actual squares. So if you put a circle around this, you're going to get these little corners that's going to show the actual color, which we don't want. That's not going to look very good. So we ended up creating this actual square that goes up and down, fills and non-fills based on the cooldown value. And this, because it's a scalar parameter, which we created here, because it's a scalar parameter, we can use a blueprint to manipulate this number. So this is how we're going to get the cooldown from the data table that we created earlier. And we're going to import it into this. And based on the cooldown, we're going to update this number as such. So, and then this lerp node will just then go between the colors. So you can create, again, you don't have to because you can just leave it at white. I'm going to create a constant 3 vector. This is going to be my transparent color. And then another one, I'm going to call it, I'm going to do like much more brighter. Actually, just do like a little bit of a gray. Yeah. Now this will go into the A field, and this will go into the B field. And then as you can see, the color just changed. And now when I make this into a 0.65, it's going to actually look like this. And that is basically it for your material. Now for my Patreons, I'll make sure that I add this file to your folder where you can download this entire project. However, for everybody else, just feel free to take a screenshot and just follow along, and you'll be able to get this material done the way it is done right now. So let's go ahead and now see how we can use this material in. Now, because this is just a material, you cannot just simply put it into the widget and expect it to work. You need to actually have a material instance because we want to be able to edit this material as we wish. So if you were to right click on this material, you automatically have an option called create material instance. I'm going to click on it and just press enter. It's going to create an INST at the end of it with the same file name, and that should be good enough. Back to our ability icon, because this is where we want to show where the cooldown is going to happen. I'm going to first start with the size box. Put it right in between the text and the portrait because we don't want to put it on top of the text. We want it to be hiding only the portrait. So I'm going to put it right here, and then also I'm going to put an image inside of that size box. Take that size box, override it, and then I'm going to make it 100 by 100, just like the other image. And the image itself, I'm going to put in the material instant right in here. So you can already see how this is going to work out. It's going to slowly start taking off the material as the cooldown timer goes on. So it's pretty exciting. But I don't like how thick it is. It's like not showing the image at all in the background. So I'm going to go here on tint, actually color and opacity, I believe. And then you can just turn down the opacity of the actual cooldown thing. So you can still see what's behind it very vaguely. So that about there is pretty good. Looking pretty good. So if I were to go and press play now, and then if I press C, you will notice that how it shows you, how it shows. And I can see that it shows very well, but then the size, we don't have a padding on this image, so it's actually connecting with the other ones. So I'm going to put like a 5 padding to it, just like we did on the portrait. So now if I were to look at it again, this looks much more cleaner. So it looks like individual icons. Now I'm going to rename this, and I'm going to say cooldown underscore mat, right? Cooldown material. Or actually I can call this cooldown underscore image because at the end of the day it is an image. And that's basically it. Now this text holder is going to show you the cooldown timer and as such. Now we need to find a way how we can edit this material so that when the cooldown is coming, when the ability gets used and the cooldown gets triggered, the actual icon will start spinning outwards so that it goes from full gray to no gray. So basically going from the fill amount from 1 to 0 in reverse. Now to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to go back into the ability icon, go to the event construct. We need to get the cooldown time now. Now the cooldown timer is relevant. So from the ability, we don't need to create anything new. From the ability itself, when this icon gets created, we already know what the cooldown of this ability is. So all we have to do is just drag off of that ability and just promote it into a variable so we can use it throughout this entire blueprint. So let me just quickly move this out of the way. There we go. We're going to leave this text for now. Again, we're going to make this dynamic in a moment, but let's work on the actual cooldown itself. Now, once we do that, we need to do one more thing. Just if we take this image, the cooldown image, which is the gray icon, and then we try to change it, nothing's going to happen because the gray image itself does not contain that scalar, which is called the cooldown. So we need to actually get this instance of the material from this image. And to do that, it's pretty straightforward. You just got to drag off of it and then say get brush. So we're getting the brush, which basically gives you this brush functionality, which is the actual material. So the material's inside of it. And we're going to get the dynamic material. Because it's a material instance, it needs to be you need to get the dynamic material. And from here, the dynamic material, what we're going to do is we're just going to promote this to a variable so we can actually use it. So we're going to call it cooldown underscore material. Okay. And that's that. Now, for the purpose of testing to make sure that this works good, I'm going to create a custom event here and initialize the cooldown functionality and then use a timer to drop the cooldown so that, or the value of the cooldown from the cooldown material so that it looks like it's actually going in reverse. So how that works is you go ahead and create a custom event. I'm going to call this cooldown underscore init, initialize kind of, right? And I'm going to drag off of this and create a new variable actually before I drag off of it. We want to get what's the remaining of our cooldown, and we know what our base cooldown is going to be, but when the timer starts dropping, we want a way to save where the actual what the current timer of that cooldown or the remaining timer is left. So here I'm going to name this like remaining cooldown, right? Again, it's going to be a float. I'll tell you why float is good. So we're going to go get remaining cooldown. Actually, we don't need to get it. We just need to set it. We need to set up the base remaining cooldown because the cooldown always starts at the highest amount of the cooldown, which is the max cooldown limit, and then it's going to make its way down to 0. So our max cooldown limit is the ability cooldown from our structure that we previously created. So I'm going to go ahead and drag that ability that we just set here, and I'm going to get it, and I'm going to set that the remaining cooldown is our base cooldown that we set up in our data table. The best thing about this is if you update the data table, all of these functions that we're creating is going to update. So you don't have to go through this and update one code at a time. You update the base data table and all of this will automatically update itself to that. So once we set up the remaining cooldown, we're going to create a timer by event. So what this timer by event is, it will run a function, a custom function, for on this interval. This time here is just showing you what's the interval between this timer. So if I put this to like 1 second, every second this event will run as long as this looping is set to true. So I can manually set the looping to true. That means every second it's going to work on bringing this remaining cooldown 1. But we don't want to do that because we want this timer event to stop, or this timer to stop, as soon as the cooldown reaches 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it a little bit dynamic, and we're going to drag off of this remaining cooldown because we know we're going to work with the remaining cooldown. And we're going to say if the remaining cooldown is not equal to 0, as long as this remaining cooldown is above 0, I want you to, because this is going to be a true, because our remaining cooldown originally is going to be something that's coming from the structure. Because it's going to be true, so as long as remaining cooldown is going to be not 0, I want this code to run. I want this timer to run, continuously keep running. And if I were to take, and then now I can drag off of this event, and then I can say custom event, and I can call this start cooldown. Okay. So now this custom event, let's bring this a little bit closer. It doesn't need to be stretched this far. Okay. All right. So the start cooldown, what we're going to do is, first things first, we need to reduce the remaining cooldown every time this event is triggered. So right now we're triggering this event for every second. So we're going to go ahead and get the remaining cooldown, which is basically what we're setting up here. And we want to subtract this amount, this time amount over here, from this. So every second the event is run, we're going to remove 1 from the remaining cooldown. So that means if the remaining cooldown is 5, for say, every second it's going to remove 1. That means this is going to run for 5 seconds. And that's what we want. We want the cooldown to run as long as the remaining cooldown exists, or as long as the base cooldown is set up for. Once we set up the remaining cooldown, once we subtract 1, we need to now set the new remaining cooldown. So what this is going to do is it's going to, let's say it starts at 5, it's going to now subtract 1, and now this new cooldown is going to be 4. And again, this Boolean function is going to keep impacting. It's going to be like, hey, is it 0 yet? Is it 0 yet? Is it 0 yet? And it's going to continuously keep running. So now what we're going to do is, now that we have 4, we need to, remember for the cooldown, we need to go from 1 to 0. So what it basically is, we need to put it in kind of like a division here, reverse, to take what is the actual cooldown, and then if I take this and then I divide this, right? Sorry, I take the remaining and then I divide it by the ability cooldown, then it's going to give me a percentage out of 100, which I can use to set up the cooldown material. So as soon as the remaining cooldown goes to 0, and then it gets divided by like 5, anything divided by 5 is going to, anything divided by 0 is going to be 0. And that's what we want. And to set up this, to call out this cooldown function, what we're going to do is this cooldown material that we just set up, we're going to go and grab that. And then we're going to say set scalar parameter by value. This is the code that we're going to be using. This is the function. For this function, you need to give it a name of the actual parameter and also the value. The value we know we're already going to set up here. Whatever the remaining is and divided by the total is what we're going to get. And the actual value of the parameter is cooldown. So I'm just going to copy here and paste it so that I don't make mistakes. Compile and save all. Now, if I start the game, nothing's going to happen because this cooldown initiation is not called yet, but we worked on the functionality. So for testing purposes, what we will do is we're going to go ahead and say cooldown initialize, okay? We don't want to start the cooldown because we want to initialize the remaining cooldown first before we call it. So now if I were to go into the game and, you know what, let me make this a little bit bigger. All right, just so that you see it. All right, and if I press C, you'll notice that it's going down, but it's not going down smooth. It's going down, but it's kind of like not very, it's almost like lagging. The reason why that is doing it is because we're running the event every single second. So every second is going to go down by 1, and that division is going to be a very high number. To easily fix that, we can just make it as 0.1. And if we make the 0.1, that means we need to subtract 0.1 here as well. So every 0.1 second, it will run. And the reason why the cooldown material kind of ticks before it starts is because we set it at 0.65. We're going to set this to 1 because we want this to be at 1. So if I were to now go and play, where is it? Okay, compile, save. Now that we set to 0.1, and if I press play, and now if I press C, that is how we like to have it. That's going to take 7 seconds. This one's going to take 7 seconds. This is 2 seconds, 5 seconds. Now you can tell, like, based on the timer, it's updating itself and it's going. Now you can even make it even more than 0.1. You can make it like 0.001 to make it much more smoother, which is kind of crazy, but I don't think we need to go that far. But I can show you how that looks like if I were to set this up at 0.001. And if I press play and if I go C, this makes it like really, really smooth. We don't want 0.1 is good, but if you want it really smooth, you can make it 0.01. So it makes it even better. With that being said, I think this is a good point to finish this video and move on to the next part. I really do appreciate everyone who has come this far in this video series and looking forward to seeing you in the next one. If this video had helped you in any way, consider liking and subscribing this video, as this helps the channel grow, reaching more developers like you who may need the help. Thank you all for joining today. If you had any questions or concerns, please feel free to leave it in the comment section and I'll sure to get to it.